Okay, to continue, we're going to go through the grammar and just talk about some general stuff. I would recommend having the PDF open in another window. I'm going to keep the dialogue on the screen in the, actually, let me see if I can zoom out a little bit. On my, I have my laptop with the PDF looking at the grammar notes, so you can look at the notes on your screen and follow the dialogue on the YouTube window. Okay. So first off, we have how to ask a question. Just like in English, you can start a question off with a word like how. So literally this is asking, how are you called? Which is different than English. Again, and when I say again, I'm referring to that introduction video that you may have skipped. So just if you hear me stressing something like I've mentioned it before, that's why. Again, you can't literally translate, so you really need to get that out of your head that you're literally translating things. And I'm going to really avoid telling you what anything means in English, because you should have already went through this vocabulary. This, like I was saying about Rosetta Stone, I don't pretend that this is a easy way to learn. You need to be doing work on your own. I'm not going to hold your hand and make a boring video where I read this chart out to you. It's pointless. You can do that on your own. I'm going to cover the stuff that you might not be able to do on your own and might not be able to read. Okay, so again, you want to ask a question. You can use a question word like how, and more commonly you can say something like, where is that? Arbeitest du auch? Arbeitest du auch? So notice the difference. If you were going to ask a question in English like this, you would say, do you work too? You would say, do you. This do in English is a really strange feature of English that you really don't see in any other languages. And think back to maybe older English that you've seen in the Canterbury Tales or Shakespeare. You would say something like, have you, or no, that's a terrible example. You would say something like, go you to the, I don't know if you actually say that in older English, but in German that's definitely how you ask a question, and it's very easy. You simply flip the verb and the noun or the pronoun. So instead of saying du, if you want to tell somebody you are working, you would say du arbeitest. But in German, to make that a question, you just flip it. Arbeitest du. Okay. Now, the conjugations, you really just need to look at those charts. I know it's boring. Look at the charts and memorize them. I guess I'll go to one of these charts though to show you an example in English, and this is one of the few English examples that's possible when it comes to conjugations, because most English conjugations is just whether or not you add an S. He runs, I run, they run. Most English conjugations, you have this one, he, she, and it as an S. That's usually it. But we have this nice verb to be, which has remained very irregular, even though all the other verbs have become simplified conjugations. So this, if you've probably never even thought about this, but why do you say I am and you are and he is? These are different words, but they're all the same. They're all just different forms of the same verb. And that's, if you're asking yourself, why does this happen? Why are all these changing? Then ask yourself, why are all these changing? The answer is, it doesn't really matter. They change and you need to learn them. Because if you say we is, or you am, or I are, you might, in some dialects that sounds okay, but in standard English it's just wrong, and it doesn't sound good. So you need to learn that in in German, you just need to learn the conjugations. That's all there is to it. So for regular verbs, heißen is a regular verb, and this is the infinitive form, the dictionary form, and the form that you'll see when there's no verb to make it get conjugated. So in a regular verb, you have ich is an e ending, du, st, 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 sie, es, te, wir, and sie will always be an. They'll always be an, except in the really, really irregular verb of to be, just like in English, it's very irregular. So one way to kind of whittle these down and make them easier to memorize is just know that ich will always be an e ending, even irregular. There's a few irregular verbs where that will change, but in even most irregular verbs, ich will always be e, du will always be st, sie, es will always be te, wir will always be, wir und sie will both always be an, and ihr will always be te. So if it's an irregular verb, sie, es, and ihr will be the same. That's a little bit easier if that helps you remember. And then we go on to arbeiten. This is, I guess, is technically a regular verb, even though you have this kind of weird extra letter getting put in there. And all I can explain on this is the reason that's there is to make it easier to pronounce. So you wouldn't want to have to say arbeitst. It just, there's too many consonants together, so they put that in there to make it easier to pronounce. That's all. You couldn't say Arbeit. You could say Arbeit, and that doesn't sound right. It needs that T sound, and that can only be added in by putting a vowel sound in between. So arbeitet. Okay. So arbeiten is basically regular. You still have e, st, t, an, t, an. So just the same endings that you saw here. Sein is extremely irregular, and you just need to memorize it. That's all there is. The only consistency here is you have an st ending, even though that first part is changing all over the place. And you have a t ending here. Again, the first part's changing a lot. And wir und sie are the same. Even though there's no an, they're the same conjugation. And if you really want to stretch it, you have seid. It's pronounced like a T, so that T ending, even though it's spelled as a D. And the reason that's spelled like that is because there's another word that's spelled with a T that means something else. So, you could almost spell that with a T if you wanted to. It would be wrong, but it would be pronounced the same. I bolded this because this is the most important verb there is. You need to learn this. Like, you should be able to conjugate this without even thinking about it. That's how much you need to just practice this until you have that completely down. And it's boring to go through this chart and do it, but I've put some stuff in here that you can practice with. Hopefully it's a little bit more fun than just staring at the chart, but you just want to kind of practice out loud, speaking out loud, saying some sentences that you know. And again, if you memorize, I strongly recommend memorizing this dialogue. If you memorize this, you'll pretty much have all of the conjugations somewhere in your head. You might have to pull out a line from your memory, but you'll have it there. Okay, going on past the conjugations. And again, you really should read all of this. I'm not going to go through everything written here. I just want to kind of summarize the most important points. We're talking about negation. So to negate something, you make it false. So in English, you do that by putting not onto the do. So again, we're going back to that do that we add on. Do you? Do you like that? I don't like. So you have to add onto the do to negate in English, which is really complicated. In German, you just need to add nicht. Ich arbeite nicht. Uh, you would think of like Henry. I think Henry the Eighth, or I don't remember the number. I like her not. So again, it's like older English. I like it not. Ich arbeite nicht. I work not. And that's how you negate. There's other ways of negation, but for negating a verb, that's how you do it. We'll talk about other negations later. That's pretty straightforward. You'll see situations where you're not really sure where to put this. Should it go here or here or here? You'll just gain a feeling for that. And within this lesson, I'm not really focusing on negation. I really want you to focus on the pronouns and conjugations. That's what you need to memorize right away to be able to continue on. And it's very worth mentioning that when you state your occupation or what you are, your nationality, you don't need to use a, like, I am a student. You don't need to say that. It's just, ich bin Student. Ich bin Student. Du bist Student. You don't need to say a. And then you have auch. Again, this is kind of, I really don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on conjugations, but just, it's double. Like in English, we have also, and we have TOO, too. In German, you pretty much just have auch, and it's easier, basically, than English. Zu Hause, this is a set phrase. The grammar of this is just like, I would have to go into the history of German, the history of the dative case and stuff to explain why this is what it is. Don't worry about that. Just know that zu Hause is a set phrase. It can even be used as a noun. So you can, my home would be mein Zuhause. Mein Zuhause. So it's, you can say I work at home, and you can say my home. It's just a phrase that means home or at home. Ich bin zu Hause. And then the next one is talking about das. Das ist. Where is that? Das hier ist. So das ist. Das means, it can mean that, but in this case it's more of a this or that, because there's really two forms of that, and English doesn't have the grammar to really make that point clear. But basically, think of two different forms of that. This is a generic that. It can refer to anything. That is, and you can put anything after it, which is very different from saying that table. That table, that is directly referring to table, whereas that is a table, that's a generic version of it. So that there's no real, in English that distinction is meaningless, but in German it's very important, because if you're going to use a direct, if you want to directly refer to something, you need, that word needs to match the gender and case of what you are referring to, which is difficult to do, whereas a generic das does not need to match the gender. It's just das ist, and you can put anything, female, male, any case, and you don't really know what a case is yet, but you will. And so yeah, das ist. So you can say das ist, and you can say anything. A person, a book, a friend. Das ist ein Freund von mir. Das ist mein Zuhause. Das ist Deutschland. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. It's generic. Okay, again, and then mein. We have mein Freund. And did we have eine or meine? No, we didn't, did we? You can look at mein and ein. And where's eine Freundin? Jeez. I thought I had that in there, didn't I? Maybe I didn't include that. Well, even if I didn't include it, you have, you have mein and ein and meine and eine. So just like you have ein Freund and eine Freundin, you have mein Freund and meine Freundin. And this is because of the gender. So if the thing you're talking about is masculine or neutral, you just have mein. If it's feminine, you have meine. And this is clearly a male friend or a female friend. But unfortunately in German you have, things like a table is masculine and a ball is masculine, but a cat is feminine. It's just, well, just random object. A toilet is feminine. There's no real reasoning behind it. You just have to memorize that for each word. And it's really important to get used to that early, that the word you use to refer to something has to match its grammatical characteristics. Okay. And then we have... Actually, let me cut the video right now and I'll continue on to another part.